this is who I've always been,
Hmm.
very feminine. It's what I've wanted and what I find joy in, and that's something I'll never get back. I'll never have a normal high school experience. I'll never have a boy ask me to prom. I'll never have a quinceañera, and that does hurt. But, maybe one day I get to have a boy properly ask me to be his girlfriend, and I'll have a wedding, but
Hello.
Hi. Hey.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So I knew you had to get ready as
Oh,
what
yeah.
are you just getting off work there? And you're in California, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you streaming as well?
No, I kinda don't wanna share this to stream, but
I figured as much. It seemed like you kind of keep those two sides of yourself a little bit isolated.
yeah.
Unfortunately, if you keep sharing your story and streaming to Twitch, you're gonna. All
Yeah.
I can say is this: Are you set up with like a couple of buttons on like an Elgato Stream Deck or like a thing so that if you get hate rated, you can like run ads, put it on follower only chat, stuff like that?
Uh, no. I
All
haven't
right. So
like,
you
I'm just
you might want to do that.
yeah, I'm barely processing, like, I don't know, just slowly stepping into this. I haven't
All
really
right.
considered, like I just wasn't expecting the attention or anything, so
Yeah. Well, before we get started, I want to do two things. All right. First of all, like let's just zone it out a little bit. I want you to just like open up and introduce yourself and like where people can find you and like just a little bit about yourself. And then I'm going to go off screen real quick and I'm going to do something that hopefully will make you a little bit more comfortable. All right.
okay.
All right. It sounds weird, but I promise. All right.
Alright. Um, I'm Jade. I'm 23 years old, and I love reading and streaming video games. And I guess I don't know if Scott has mentioned it, but I am a detransitioner. So I was born female, and when I was a teenager, I attempted to transition into a male, not a male, a boy. And I decided to go off those hormones. So yeah. Oh, you're muted.
I take it this is your first time really talking about it. I couldn't find any other interviews or
Oh, yeah.
discussions.
Yeah. I
Well,
originally was going to just film a YouTube video and post it, but I guess it just blew up on Twitter, and I still plan on making a video, with pictures and just my whole story, but I've been holding it off for 2 years.
hmm, since January of 2021, I did my research. All right. So I'm rocking the powder blue for you. Hopefully we can, we can get through this. We can have a discussion. I saw you obviously. I think the post that blew up. There's a few of them that blew up. There was one that I saw that I came across on Twitter,
Yeah.
um, where I think the first thing I saw was the complications of the gallstones, which seems like that was your kind of
Mhm.
pivotal moment.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That was
and we go ahead.
I completely messed up when I said the time frame for the gallstones. That was February 10th to February 22nd of last year. Um, I just said January because that's when I had stopped taking tea, and it was just a complete mistake, a typo. But yeah.
Well, I mean that look, that's okay. All right. Nobody is ready for this. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone's I don't think anybody. I've spoken to quite a few detrans individuals. When I reached out to you, I think I kind of like gave you the list, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not trans. I don't have anyone in my family that's trans. Um, and I'm someone that just kind of found myself in this space because honestly, because this is where the culture was. And someone that does politics, it's been a serious issue, I think, for parents. I'm a parent myself. I have an autistic son. You start seeing, you know, the way these people are kind of like targeted and isolated, and the way the ideology is going. And so I've done a lot of reading on queer theory and gender theory and critical race theory and stuff like that. And yeah, so I've spoken to a lot of people, and I saw you and I was like, oh, no offense, not to say you're a dime a dozen or anything, but it's like you see these and you're like, it's like the sad, tragic, unfortunate story you've heard 1,000 times, right?
Yeah.
You know, they had some level of trauma, they had some level of issues, they had some comorbidities of anxiety, usually bullying, and it leads towards, this isolation, this depression. And then, they find this group that is accepting, presumably, at least in the beginning, that gives you a hero status, that you can focus all of those issues onto this one singular thing and kind of ignore all of the underlying problems. And it becomes easy. And not only that, all of the people involved funnel you into this, right? It's almost like they're waiting
Yeah.
for you to give the cues so that they can give the next positions. And for some that works out, right? Because that's who they were, I think. Very, very small amount. And some they desist very early. They realize it's just a phase. And then for
Mm.
some, it can be a lifelong detrimental, traumatic experience, both physically and mentally. But what I saw something interesting, and I saw something different, which is that a very large embrace of your femininity, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Which is not very common with detrans people, right?
No,
Usually detrans.
yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
realized that I had no clue that I was different from other detransitioners. I just kind of
Mm.
saw myself as they were, but when people were pointing it out, it was like, "Oh, I guess." I mean, I'm heterosexual, female, very feminine. I never even realized that there was such a huge I don't know, usually I see bisexual women that are still more masculine or butch
Mhm.
lesbians or even tomboys. I just had never even realized until the attention.
Well, I mean, the question is like, we're talking about a community, the trans community, right? That is understudied and relatively small. And then we're talking about an even smaller portion of the community, which is detrans individuals that are willing to tell their story. And
Mhm.
so I don't know if you're actually atypical of detrans people. And I think anybody that claims that you are also doesn't know, because you're talking about what, like 30 people that are like out there and have really told their story and have like garnered
Yeah,
media attention. And I do think that there is in such a deep and heated culture war, there's a lot of people looking for individuals like yourself to either attack or to hold up as a pedestal. And I'm,
mhm,
I'm sure that's like a a really awful predicament to be in, right? After all that you've been through and feel like you're
yeah,
coming out of the other side, I feel like it would be so much easier to just fade away into obscurity and be a female that has a slightly deeper voice and not tell a soul. But it takes balls, pun intended here, um, to come out and and kind of tell your story, right? And tell what happened and explain the pitfalls and the way we've swung so far in our culture and in our kind of like in our education system and in the lack, I would say, of care within the medical community, and tell that story. But at the same time, I do feel like the media picks people, and a lot of
yeah,
people are not seen. So I don't know if you're necessarily um, abnormal, but I do know that you're from a detrans perspective. But I do know that you kind of present yourself differently,
yeah.
than most of the other detrans that I've seen. And so I was like, man, I've got to talk to this person.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I wanna start off by saying that when I was very little, I was, like, the girliest kid that you can imagine. I mean,
Mm,
there are girls that love dolls, that play with baby dolls, of course, they love Elsa dresses, but I was, like, just I literally thought I was a princess. I thought life was a fairy tale. I mean, I was just so girly.
mm,
And my personality when I was little, before I went to kindergarten, I was very confident and like I knew who I
mhm,
was um and it wasn't until I hit kindergarten where that just completely like crashed down and that like, I wasn't me anymore.
mm.
And
So it seems like the best place maybe to start is to maybe just go into the story, right?
yeah,
Like
sure.
maybe as a foundation, as a basis for why you believe what you believe and like why you're speaking and things like that. I didn't know that about the kindergarten. Like what the earliest that I had seen was, you know, and I'm sure we'll get there, was, you know, the early onset puberty. But
Mm,
um but like, yeah, let's, I mean, like, let's get into the nitty gritty, I guess, if you're willing to go there and
yeah.
be brave, and let's go. I do want to say though, when I do these interviews, I've done quite a few with interviews in general. um Sometimes I ask hard questions, but at the same time I don't expect that you have to give me an answer. If you feel
You
uncomfortable with a
can
question,
ask anything. I'm fine with
well, I'm
anything.
gonna, I'm gonna, you know, but I just want to let you know, like, don't feel obligated or pressured in any way that like that it's like, well, it's
Yeah.
normal or like I'm weird for not answering these questions. Like some questions that I ask are going to be deeply personal, and like if you're like, look, I don't want to go there, I'm all
Yeah.
for it, right? Like I'm not going to be offended in any way if you're like, no, let's not go there. But yeah, you said it started at 6, right? Presumably in kindergarten, but
Well,
what was the family life situation before that?
yeah,
Because I assume
that's
from what I've read, you had like an every other weekend dad at some point.
oh, no, I've always had both parents,
Okay.
uh, good parents. They just weren't very physically affectionate. They weren't bad, they're amazing, they still are, but they became parents very, very young. They were teenagers, and
Mm,
so my oldest sister, who was the oldest sibling, she was like my 3rd parent when I was little. She was the one who taught me, you know, how to be confident in myself, just all she's the one that really gave me that physical affection and those words of affirmation. It's not that my parents, again, they were amazing, but some parents just aren't comfortable with those types of things. They don't know how to go about words of affirmation, things like that.
mm,
So, my sister was kind of that person that held me together, and before I entered kindergarten, she had moved away because she was older. She was, I think, my age right now, like 23, um, and I got to school, and I was immediately the outcast because I was shy. I didn't know how to talk to people. You know, if my sister had been there, I know she would be like, "Oh, just talk to people, just make friends, go up to this person, go." She But she wasn't there, and that's when the bullying started, was pretty much in kindergarten. Nobody wanted to
so
be my friend.
so you
The
feel like
boys
maybe you entered kindergarten kind of like right at this transition where you had been socialized in more of an adult kind of friendship, right? Your sister was probably an adult that didn't treat you the same way like a child your age would treat you. And so the
yeah,
way that you knew how to converse and fit in was with a close knit family, and you get to school and there's like these kids that are your age. You're not really sure how to talk to them. And you're also not really sure how to talk to your parents because your parental figure in some ways was not the somewhat distant parents that were trying to build a family and build a house and keep the roof over your head and doing these things, but it was your
Yeah.
sister that was no longer there. And so you had that isolation, and that kind of begins in kindergarten, the ostracization,
Yeah.
if I'm catching this correct. Okay.
Mhm. I don't know what caused them to bully me. I think it was just the fact that I was shy and I didn't
Hmm.
speak. I had one friend throughout every grade, and then I eventually they would, like, go away, they would fall out, they would, like, move away, so I think it was because they felt bad for me, because otherwise I would just, like, read on a bench or, like, sit with the teacher, but they bullied me for everything. They bullied me for my eyebrows because 'cause I'm Latina, I had, like, big eyebrows, um, and then I hit puberty very, very young. I was 9 years old. I
Yeah.
was out with that one friend. I had gone to the aquarium with her, and I had gone home, and sorry, this might be a little graphic, but I went to the restroom and I told my mom, like, I had an accident. Like, I went number 2 because blood when it's old is brown. And she's like, "No, that's not it. That's blood. You have your
Hmm.
period." And she was trying not to freak out, but I heard her freaking out because I thought I was dying. Like, she was telling me it was blood. I had no clue what she was talking about. She had called my sister. She was like, "What do I do?" Like, she got her period. Um, she was asking me if somebody had touched me. It was it was scary. And then I went to school, and I was growing faster than the other kids. I had already grown a chest. I was growing very, very tall. I was taller than the teachers. Um, I was growing hair. I had to shave, and the bullying just got so much worse. They would call me fat because I was tall. I don't know why kids associate, like, tallness with being fat, but I was not fat. I was a thin child.
Yeah. So you know, the early onset puberty is really destructive towards girls. I think it's something that people don't talk about enough. Even if it's not a medical condition, even if you're just the first one in your grade, in like third grade, to go through this, it can be really traumatizing. And I think it's difficult, especially because the exact opposite is true for men, for boys, right? The
Yeah,
boys that go through puberty the quickest tend to be more popular. They tend to, gain positive attention. Whereas with girls, there is something to be said about, a certain amount of body mass gain, and being thin is seen as such a positive thing. And as you gain tall and you get those spurts, and right before the spurt, you put on a couple of pounds.
mhm.
There's a lot of bullying associated with that. And I can't imagine being a young parent that's completely, just kind of going through the guesswork, trying to figure
Yeah,
this out. And then, of course, like you said, I noticed in one of your tweets, because I went through basically everything. One of your tweets, you had talked about some of the bullying had turned into, and I don't know if you had mentioned this or if other people had mentioned this or how it occurred, but there was a lot of rumors going around that you'd been molested or sexually
yeah, yeah. I
abused,
was
because of your early puberty, and that it was like really, really impactful to you.
yeah. I remember I was in the stall. I wanted to change my pad, and there were a pair of older girls, definitely not in my grade, but they were saying out loud so I could hear, "Oh, I heard she got her period very young. Did somebody touch her?" I remember one of my friends even asking me if I had been touched. I was asked it multiple times. Um, I don't know how it got to the school. Maybe their parents. I know that the teachers would bully me as well. When I was little, I would dress in these outfits. Like, I would my mom and me would put them together again because I was very girly. The teachers would bully me for that. Um,
Mm.
I also there's just so much to it. I struggled with OCD when I was little, and I had all these rituals, uh, where I would mess with things and I would do repeated actions, and one of my teachers all day long would pick on me. When I would do a repeated action or a ritual, she would, call me out in front of the whole class, and it was all day long. She would be like, "Why are you doing that? Stop doing that." Uh, she would put me in timeout. I would, constantly ask to go to the restroom because that was part of, like, my ritual. I would have to go wash my hands. Uh, she would constantly call my parents and complain about my actions, and then the next grade, uh, I was told by students that she was talking about me to the class. She was saying, "I'm so glad that she's not in my class this year."
Oof.
And and this wasn't the only teacher. There was another teacher that had bullied me during PE, because I was very shy. I had social anxiety. I was scared to do anything. This had come about later, but she almost got fired because she had pretty much insulted me in front of the whole class. She mocked me. She mocked, like, my actions because I was doing jumping jacks, and she just, like, mocked my the way I was doing them, but,
Did you did you never have an IEP for your school?
um, no,
I take that as a
they
no.
just are
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Yeah, institutional education plan. I was just curious if how well I'm just trying to elucidate the like what's going on here. That's God, that's awful. I can I mean like I think we all kind of have similar experiences to a certain degree, but probably not to that magnitude, right? I know when I was in school, God, I accidentally brought a can of lighter fluid to school in middle school because my friends and I, my friend was like a stoner and I had like a overnight bag and then like a school bag and I put it in the wrong bag. And then like from that point on, I think I spent like an entire year in school suspension and I would go back to a class and like the teacher would just find a reason to kick me out. And like from that point on, like I was a pariah from the teachers, but I was like very extroverted and I didn't have like any social anxiety and I didn't have anything like that. So like I was just like, oh, if you're gonna make fun of me and you're gonna like clown on me, then I'll clown on you. Right now, you know what I mean? Like, so I kind of had that as like a protective factor. Lo and behold, I became a Twitch streamer that talks about politics. I wonder if there's something to that in early education. My anti-authoritarian streak, started at a very young age. But so I think we do all kind of have those experiences a little bit. But when you're young like that, it's you know there's this thing with memory where we look back on our memories as an adult and we look back at them with an adult brain, right?
Mm,
We think and feel like an adult, and when we reconstruct a memory, we're not really remembering the memory. We're remembering details and then reimagining. And I think what many of us forget when we go through that process is how much at a young and developing age you really do feel like the center of attention anytime something is pointed towards you.
mm,
Anytime somebody's laughing, even if they're not laughing at you, it really genuinely feels like everybody's laughing at you. And so to have
yeah,
a teacher mock you directly,
mm.
to actually
That
point it out, right?
multiple teachers.
Right. And like to have another teacher tell another classroom about it. Like I can't imagine walking through the school and seeing someone giggle as you walk by and wondering like, are they laughing at me or are they just laughing at a joke? And like having that constant feeling, that constant pressure,
Yeah,
like the attention is on you. Even in the situations where it's not, it might as well be.
yeah. I mean, as I grew out of not grew out of puberty, as people had started going through puberty themselves, they grew taller than me. They grew more curves than me. They grew more boobs than me. There were pregnancy rumors. Mind you, this was elementary school, so, like, from kinder to 6th grade, there were 13-year-olds talking about having sex, And it's like, why did you bully me then? Like, it was I don't know, whenever I had crushes, it was like, well, there's no hope in that because they probably hate me. And it was true.
Mm,
I remember, I had a crush and somebody that was my friend told him, and he said, "Ew, I would never like her, she's fat." And I was standing right there, so he knew that I heard him. I wasn't fat. Uh, Another teacher also it was weird the way teachers just hated me. I think it was
mm.
because they favored the popular kids and the popular kids just didn't like me. But it was my birthday and my sister had come to visit and she was like, I'm bringing cupcakes to the class." And he said, "No, we don't do that. We don't bring sugar in the class." And my sister was like, "Okay, I'll bring something healthy then." And she bought like the whole class Subway Happy Meals or sandwiches. And a month later, a kid had his birthday and he brought cupcakes to the class. So that just goes to show that there were kids telling their parents, telling the teachers, and teachers favoring the kids. I don't know. I had never done anything to any of these kids. I had never spoken a word to them. I would never even stand up for myself. I wasn't I don't consider myself an ugly kid. I think I looked like a doll when I was little. There were there were pictures, like, I was not an ugly child, there was just no reason for it. Um, but yeah, I do agree that when you look back on it, it does feel like everything is against you, and there's just no safety.
Well, I mean, people can certainly be cruel. And I think there is this reflex that we all have to, you know, I think of the kids works for a reason, right? Because no one wants to see a child sad on their birthday, right? Like I did, like you have to be a special kind of monster. And yet I do think that we tend to, even teachers, even students, right? When something or someone is different, right? It becomes a place to place negativity, to keep it away from ourselves, to defend ourselves, right? It's always the bullies are the ones that have the most fucked up home lives. We're like, well, why is that? It's because they have all this negativity and it has to be put somewhere. And we all kind of have that. And it's unfortunate, but it seemed like you were in a way, kind of a constant punching bag for everyone around, or at least that's how you
Yeah,
feel today. You know what I mean? I don't know. I wasn't there, right? But
yeah,
but certainly you, at the very least, felt that way. Being made fun of for your OCD and things like that is a special kind of fucked up. I think we all recognize that, and but it is also, again, I hate to say this, but maybe there's some comfort in it, in the fact that you're not alone there. That is so common with individuals that are detrans,
yeah.
individuals that
Mm,
that find themselves kind of in the cult, if you will. um and they become non-binary, they become this. It's because they're already in contact with therapists, they already have body issues, and
mm,
they have obsessive personalities, right? Fixation disorders.
mm,
You pick one thing and you cannot let it go once it becomes a thing. And unfortunately, sometimes the thing you pick is gender.
mhm.
And so maybe, you know, if you want to continue talking about your bullying as a young child, we can, but maybe we move forward because, again, I've done a lot of research into what you've said publicly, but again,
Yeah,
I'm unsure of the timeline, right? Like what I
yeah,
have is puberty at 9. I have a presumed abusive online relationship in a county in California, not far from Sacramento. I have, chest binding at 12, right? Like there's
mm,
kind of
yeah,
bullet points, but I want to hear, if I can, if you'll
Yeah.
indulge, you know, what makes those bullet points real?
Um, well, entering middle school, I did not have any friends. I had been bullied. I was being put into a Christian private school to avoid bullying, and I took comfort in the internet. I found friends on the internet, and, um that yeah, I did start chest binding at 12. I would buy video games online. I would ask my mom like, "Hey, can I buy this video game? It's this much. It's like 20 bucks, 12 bucks, whatever." She would give me her card, and with that, I bought a binder, and I hid it from her for a long time. So, yeah, I was 12 when I started binding, but,
Mm,
the whole thing started online. I had been making friends online that were into similar things, you know, the same books that I was into, the same TV shows, the same comics, and that kind of went down this hole of gay fiction, so guy on guy. And I had gotten into that uh because it kind of separated me from womanhood, from being a girl. You know, when I was little, my dream when I was little, was to find my Prince Charming, get married, and have babies, and be an author.
mm.
Like, I didn't care if it was, popular books, I just knew that I wanted to write. So that was my dream. So when I went online and found all these stories of gay men falling in love, um, I saw it as a way to kind of have that, but avoid the pain of womanhood, the reality of womanhood,
Can
this,
I
like
dig in a little here for just a little bit of specificity? When you say you went online and you were meeting people, like what, like in what way? Were these Reddit forums? Was it Discord?
it
Was it
was
chat
it
rooms?
was
How did this start?
it was Instagram, it was Tumblr.
Mm-hmm. Of
Those were
course,
the
it was
2 main
Tumblr.
things,
How'd I
yeah.
forget Tumblr? Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, it was mainly Instagram and Tumblr, a little bit of Twitter, and when I was talking to these people, they had introduced me to transitioning. Some were adults, some were just my age, some were like 14 and I was 12. I had no clue that it was even a thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I had watched YouTube videos of phalloplasties and top surgeries, and I remember watching it and I was just so scared. I just couldn't even imagine putting myself through that. I was like, "What? That's not me." So for a while, I just wore binders, but didn't necessarily identify as that. I told myself, "You know what? It's okay. I can just be like a tomboy." Um, but that just it wasn't enough. I
So
didn't
if what you're saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is you had this kind of this history of isolation and social
mm,
anxiety, and then the trauma associated with early onset puberty, and then the kind of the constantly being singled out, and
mhm.
it was less so much a dysphoria about you being the right gender, but it
Yeah,
began as dysphoria is I just want to fucking hide. I
yeah,
just don't want to be seen that way.
yeah,
Can I please just fucking, if I'm going to be the kid that nobody talks to, can I also be the kid that nobody notices?
exactly. Yeah, that's and at first it started off as like, well, I can still have my romance that I always wanted, but I can hide these parts of myself. So
Hmm.
I can be loved by these men, but and not have any competition and not be part of this drama that is womanhood, this pressure. And then eventually it just went to I just don't want to uh be seen in society. I just want to hide. I don't even want romance anymore. It was yeah, it was just an escape. I never ever felt like, "Oh, I have wrong body parts." I never felt any anything other than, like, discomfort at puberty. I never yeah, I just wouldn't call it dysphoria at all.
I want to timeline skip a little bit, maybe get a little bit more information. But I'm seeing a pattern here. You know, full disclosure, I went to grad school for counseling, right? So I'm pretty well researched and aware of the literature and psychotherapy. And when you tell me your story, as so far, obviously this may be the adult looking back on the situation, but when you tell me your story now, I can't imagine any ethical psychotherapist hearing this and labeling and putting so much transference on you that,
Mm,
well, you have gender dysphoria, right? Like
yeah.
you have all of the telltale signs, not of gender dysphoria, but of
Mm,
latching on to social contagion as like gender dysphoria being an answer to kind of like not deal with all of the other problems that you have, which is the bullying, the
yeah,
body image
exactly.
issues, the fear and stuff. And so my question then is this how you spoke earnestly? Like if you can, if to the best of your ability, is this how you explain things to the nurses and to the psychologists that you
Yes.
spoke to?
Yes. So, I had still been suffering with OCD, so I
Mm-hmm.
started therapy at 16 for that. It was just for OCD and social anxiety. I had went on medication for OCD, which they had not even given me medication for OCD or anxiety. It was medication for depression. So that just goes to show how the medical professionals in that area work. They did
Mm-hmm.
not. And I had expressed to her, uh, because at this time I was like fully presenting as a boy. I had my hair short. I was
Mm-hmm.
binding. Um, at school, I hadn't been presenting. I hadn't been calling myself Jaden yet. That was a name that I picked. Um, but online, I was since I was 12 to 13, pretty much online. I was just Jaden. Um, and I told her about this, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna transfer you to this other therapist."
Gender clinic, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was the same place. It was just
Mm-hmm.
this therapist specifically dealt with LGBT children. Um, and she was a lesbian therapist. She had a wife. I don't want to say her name. But so I had been transferred there, and for months it had just been about my OCD and anxiety. And I swear, talking to her was like talking to a wall. I remember not even wanting to go to therapy. I remember getting into the car every single time, like, she just does not listen to me. Everything I say is like just hitting her in the face and bouncing back off. Like it was just I would say something about my OCD, for example, and she would just say the complete opposite. She was I don't think she was mentally fit to still be a therapist. Like she was getting older.
Mm.
I
Did it feel like she had an agenda or a motive, or was it just that she was
It
just
was just she
not
was just
competent?
not there. Yeah. It
Right.
was I don't wanna be rude, but that's just what it was. And so she had done the process of me getting my hormones when I was 17. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember, like, the exact details, I just know that the process was done
Yeah.
when I
Oh,
was
kitty.
17 because she had a friend that worked at Planned Parenthood. A friend,
Mm-hmm.
a nurse. It was her friend. That's how I got it so quickly. Um, she said, "I know that you can't get your both of your parents' signatures because your dad would say no," because my dad was against it. Um, So she had just worked through it herself. I don't know how. And then I was ready for an appointment a few days after my 18th birthday.
Okay, yeah. So Planned Parenthood has a policy that they will only give hormone replacement therapy and androgen therapy to individuals 16 to 17 with the consent of both parents, assuming both parents are alive.
Mm,
But 18, you know, it doesn't even matter.
yeah.
And so what you're saying is that she knew people and she kind of like fast tracked you so
Yeah.
that like the process was done, begun without parental consent from your father. And
Yes.
then like a few days after your 18th birthday, boom, you're good to go. So it
Yeah.
wasn't technically in violation of Planned Parenthood's rules, but it was like looking back on it, you feel a sense of like, why the fuck would you fast track this? Like,
Yeah.
why are we not talking more about this?
She
Is
had
that kind of
questioned.
like what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah. She had questioned me for 2 days. I don't remember anything further than that. It was pretty much just and I remember bringing these things up to her. I had told
Hmm.
her everything, that I was bullied, that I had gone through puberty early, that I was a very girly child, and she again, it was like talking to a wall. She's like, "Well, boys can play with dolls too." She said something along those lines of like, there's gay children, gay boys that play with girl dolls. It doesn't mean that's how they feel or something along those lines.
Like she had
I
an
was express
excuse ready for you instead of
Yeah,
listening to you.
yeah. But this was with everything. This was with OCD, this was with anxiety. It was like she was just going through a process she always goes through of just listening to
Mm.
kids, handing them hormones, listening, handing hormones, like, it
I, you know, I'll admit that I have a certain bias, obviously, right? Not quite, the full blown right wing fash bias or anything, but I have a certain bias when I hear this and recognize that in 20 years, assuming some other form of craziness in our society doesn't go down, that we're going to look at this as the most insane form of experimentation on children. I mean, you have
Mm,
every indication from what you've said of social contagion or not social contagion. Let me rephrase because we haven't gotten to that portion yet, whether or not you're latching onto a friend group because you're mostly doing it online, but you have every indication that there's something else here, right? You have fixation
mm,
disorder, you have trauma, you have early onset puberty. Like you have
mm,
everything that like are these other issues that need to be picked apart and dealt with before we just assume gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria. And
yeah,
and yet this person is on a mission to help, presumably, but to help with zero empathy and zero listening.
yeah, yeah,
Ah,
and it
that's rough.
wasn't yeah, it wasn't only the online community, though.
Hmm.
It was also high school. I, again, had to go to a special school, so, it was a charter school. It was for arts and technology and performing arts to avoid bullying. So, that school was all about LGBT rights and acceptance, and
Right.
there had already been girls that were going on testosterone in that school, um, and I did have amazing teachers, um, a best friend, but the community was just it was like I was pressured into transitioning. I don't wanna say it was intentional, it was just kind of like, "When are you going on hormones? Are you gonna take hormones? When are you gonna" and
Mm.
when I had told I was sort of, like, pushed into being Jaden and using male pronouns, and I don't wanna say that I didn't want that, but it was definitely like, I wouldn't have gone through the process that quickly had it not been for the environment. at all.
Do you feel when you say I'm trying to envision it, right? And so you know, there's kind of two things I can envision here, and I'm kind of curious which one you think was more accurately represents your experience. So, on one hand, there is the I don't fit in even within this group, and
Mhm.
this group feels like a place I could fit in, but they have conditions, and
Mm.
I'm afraid that if I don't meet these conditions, if I speak up against these things, it'll be the rest of the experience that I had before all over again. I need to, like, I'm not sure that I want to do this. Part of me wants to do this. Part of me doesn't want to do this. Whether it be socially transitioning your name, or hormone replacement therapy, or other kind of like small changes in behavior. And so, like, I feel pressured to do this because what if they abandon me too? And then there's the second one, which is that they were more loving and accepting, and you're kind of confused, but you're like, finally somebody gets me. Finally, maybe this really is where I belong. Maybe this really is the answer to all of my problems. Like, even that little voice of doubt in the back is just that little voice of doubt that's always been there, and I shouldn't trust it because these people are being nice to me. Like, do you feel like it was more one or the other, or was it both?
I think the first one came about later, and
Mm.
the second one was what I felt, yeah.
Mm. So you feel like it was like, holy fuck, someone finally gets it. And then the
Yeah.
longer that you're there and the more that that little voice gets louder, the more you start to see the other people that are like, you're not fucking questioning, are you? Like,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
immediately a quick smile and you're like, what is this place and where am I?
Yeah. Mhm.
Oof. All right. I mean, is anecdotal as that is, I think that's insightful to understand the experience because I'm a millennial, right? You know what I mean? Like trying to understand this, I mean, I can think about it academically, right? And I
Mhm.
can empathize a little bit, but it can be difficult because, like, when I was in school, like the gay straight alliance was created when I was in like 11th grade. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it was just a
Mhm.
very different environment. But I was in show choir, so I had tons of gay friends, But it was just a different place. You know what I mean? It almost feels so much more accepting when I was a kid, so much more open, despite the fact that we were supposed to be the ones that needed to progress. I
Yeah.
want to back up a little bit before we get into more of a broad thing because I really want to finish your story.
Mm.
And I don't know if you're doing this intentionally or if I kind of led you there, which I think I did. Um, but there's a period we're leaving out that I think is kind of a really important part of this story, which is kind of the progression of what happened online before you got to high school. That
Yeah.
where you started binding, who you were talking to online,
Mm.
and I mean, you've stated before that you feel that you have PTSD from some of those interactions. Luckily, one of those individuals might might not be online anymore. Uh, but again, I only have the bullet points, and I want to
Mm.
see. I'm curious what that means when it's real, and how does your story finish? Because I think that that's a really important part of it.
Yeah. Well, the PTSD is from an abusive relationship I had while I was detransitioning.
Okay,
And the online relationships, they were between adults and friends around my age. One of them in particular, I had a friendship with her for almost 8 years, and, which I lost for detransitioning, but
obviously.
the adults online, yeah, they
Sorry, it's just yeah, you're gonna lose like all of the
yeah,
LGBT
yeah.
friends that you have when you detrans, except for like one or
Oh,
two. You'll
yeah,
find out who the real ones are, and the rest of them were just there to feed their own narcissism.
yeah. So the adults online, I would talk to them through, playing video games or through just shared interest. The talk kinda came from there, but there were also posts on not only Twitter, but Tumblr on how to get hormones, on what
Hmm.
to say to your parents and your family members. You know, if they don't approve of you, then they don't love you. Um, it was kind of like script of, oh, if somebody says this, then you say this to counteract that point.
Mm,
It was,
mm,
and I regret it so much because I had destroyed my relationship with my dad because he was the only one that disproved of it. And my dad loves me so much. Like he's so happy to have his daughter back, and that's all he ever cared about was losing who he essentially knew I was.
mm,
And I had been groomed. I fully believe I was groomed into hating him, into destroying that relationship because what do you do when you're a kid and there's adults online that are saying your parents don't love you because they don't accept this? Like I was a kid.
mm.
It's I don't
Well, I
know,
mean,
like
at your age, right? You live in a world now where, well, maybe not now, but at the time, where it wasn't just adults online, right? I mean, it was a pervasive media. It was a kind of a narrative
yeah,
that
yeah,
is
definitely.
growing,
Yeah.
and it was starting in schools. I mean, California has insanely high rates of non-binary, bisexual,
Oh
LGBT
yeah.
identifying people. And it's
Mm,
like, oh, there's no social contagion here. Well, then why does California have 10 times the rates of Ohio? Make that make sense, right?
mm,
Like all the gay kids weren't born in California, all right? But
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like that doesn't make sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not, it's none of this stuff does. We've gone through the science a lot, but I think, you know, there seems to be an elephant in the room. I've given you an opportunity to talk about it and you haven't talked about it. So
Mm.
I'm going to assume unless you bring it up, you don't want to talk about it.
Oh,
And
I'm just
so,
answering your questions. I don't
oh,
mind
I'm
any.
sorry. I'm sorry. If you don't mind,
No,
maybe
I
I'm
don't
being
mind.
presumptuous.
I don't
Um,
mind.
but there was a particular person in when you say that you believe that you were groomed,
Mm.
um, that was recently arrested for several
Oh,
counts
yeah.
of child pornography. Um, you can
Mm.
name the name if you want. I have the name. I don't know if you want to say the name of the individual. But how did that play? Like how did that come about? And how did that change your trajectory in this space? Obviously, you had to have been isolated and kind of leaning towards this online community in lieu of your parents before. Um,
Right. So during this time, I had moved away from my hometown where I originally started the transition, and I had left all my friends. I had an online relationship with a different man, not the man that's arrested. Um, and at this point, I think was my lowest. I think after immediately after starting testosterone, actually, I just did not feel good. It
mhm.
wasn't just I mean, there were physical things, like I felt low on energy. I was binge eating because I just hated myself. Uh, I had no thoughts in my head, as weird as that sounds. I don't remember having complex thoughts. I don't remember forming sentences in my mind on testosterone. It was the weirdest thing. But at this point, when I had moved, I did not know where I wanted my life to go. I was lost. I didn't like
What
the
age was this? I'm sorry to interrupt. What age?
20, 19 to
Okay.
20.
Okay.
Um, I didn't like what testosterone had done. I thought that testosterone was meant to make me into a completely different person. Yeah, I did want it to hide myself and just to not exist, but what I looked in the mirror and I just hated myself. And I thought I was trying to get distant from myself, but all I was just this weird transformed version of me. I was still me, and that was the problem. Uh,
Mm,
and so that man that I had a relationship with, which is not the one that's arrested, he told me that he had cheated on me and just proudly admitted it. And I had no reaction. I just kind of like was like, what now? Because I had planned to go meet him and start a family and get married just like I wanted, but I was like, "Well, I don't want that with him. I can't have that with him because he cheated." And I still had these desires that were following me of just falling in love and getting married and having kids, and that really hit me for some reason. It was very random.
mm,
And so, as a form of self-harm, because I love to do that, I was going online on Grindr, finding men to sleep with that were apparently gay or bi, and that's what I would do. I would sneak out, I would meet them. It wasn't many. It was like 2 or 3, and one of them had assaulted me, and that's how I stumbled upon this man who is the one that's arrested, and I met him, and I got along with him. I felt like we had a bond and we could be together, and that was sort of my exit out of the transition. It was my excuse. I had already been wanting to stop whatever I had become,
mm,
you know, but I had used him as my excuse for that because, uh, yeah, I just saw him as my way out to the future that I wanted, which was to get married and have kids and what I had envisioned. And so I told my group of friends, "Hey, I don't feel this way anymore. I don't want to be Jaden anymore. I don't wanna be on hormones anymore." And they just put the blame all on him. They're like, "You're just obsessed. You just like him so much that you want to get his approval," and um, they had tried to get me into these chat rooms where they would discuss my identity. They're like, "Oh, we can talk about it. Maybe you're
mm.
non-binary." Like, I was like, "No, I feel like
How
this
can
is
we
the
keep you
future."
in the cult?
Yeah. I was like,
I hate to interrupt. I do because I'm really trying to listen intently, but maybe I'm not quite picking up. Maybe I'm just dumb. So you're 19 or 20. The abuser is the second person or the first person.
the second, the second.
So you formed a bond with the abuse. I'm sorry. One cheated on you.
Right.
One assaulted you.
I'll just name
Okay.
them. I'll just name them. So,
Okay.
the one that cheated on me, his name is Aaron. Um, I had gotten into a relationship with him online when I was still a minor and he was 25. And I excused it because we had been online friends before that throughout high school. And that's the one that cheated on me. The man that I met after that was Malachi, who uh, you can see online his charges. That's who I had met afterwards. And that's the
And
person that I started the detransition with.
so Malachi abused you, but you went back to him and he helped you detransition.
No, no, no. Sorry,
I'm so
I know this
sorry.
is so
I apologize.
confusing.
I
Yeah,
apologize.
so
Maybe I'm dumb.
I Aaron had cheated on me, and
Hmm.
I had been on Grindr talking to men to sleep with because of Aaron's cheating.
Right.
So I would use that as a form of self-harm,
Mhm.
and one of those men had assaulted me, which is what continued my self-harm, and a man that I had met after all that was Malachi. So we had slept together one night,
Mm.
and we had gotten along, and at this point, I had already been hating myself. I had already been wanting to get out of this Jaden character, and I had seen Malachi as an escape of finally I can just like have a boyfriend, like a real life boyfriend that I can marry and have kids with, and I can stop being this. And
So then
so
what happened with him? I didn't realize it was three people. I was still trying to connect it to two people.
yeah.
So
Well,
what happened with the third one? Obviously we have the arrest record.
right. So I had been with him throughout my detransition the first few months. He was just a normal guy. Um, he I mean, there were red flags looking back, but he wasn't physically harming me, he wasn't abusing me, and then he had disappeared for 2 months, and then he came back, and that's when his abuse started. And
Mm.
yeah, when he had disappeared, I had just gone to the ER for pain. I woke up one night and I was screaming. I thought that I was dying. I had never felt a pain like that. And they told me that it was a cyst, an ovarian cyst, but I knew that
Hmm.
it wasn't just that. So, I mean, the story with Malachi is a part of my detransition. It's like I can tell the story without him, but at the same time, it's like he plays a huge role in it.
I mean, God, that's an awful can of worms, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your abuser is in some way, shape, or form. I don't want to say saving grace, but is the last
Yeah.
leg of like seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Um,
Mhm.
was it? I mean, can you open up about that a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
it like how in what way was he allowing you to see who you were? Was it a negative way? Was it a controlling thing where someone finally just happened upon you that controlled you in the right direction? And then once you were led that way, you're like, wow, I really do see a lot of this. And then eventually you were like, but also fuck you.
So it started off as just me seeing uh an opportunity of this life with him. I wouldn't say that he controlled that decision in any way. I just saw, what I had always wanted.
Mm.
And I started my detransition. I was very happy detransitioning, Um my sister and my mother were buying me the clothes that I wanted, the human hair wig, makeup. I was just very happy, and alongside that, he was there and he was normal, and then it just quickly I had found myself, and then
Mm.
it quickly went back to I'm lost again. And
Ah.
he he verbally abused me, physically abused me, sexually assaulted me. He financially abused me. Um, yeah, he would control what I would wear. So I always had to be exposed. Uh, and if I wasn't, he would just ignore me. He there's just so much to it.
I don't want to. There's no need to really pry that deeply into it if you don't want to.
Mm,
Um, just as a public service announcement to all the ladies out there, that's that's where it almost always starts. If you see a man trying to control what clothing you're wearing and really being weird about the clothing you're wearing and withholding affection and attention based off
mm,
of certain clothing, or trying to gaslight you into feeling that you're being some type of way or being disrespectful to him because you're dressing a certain way. Now, if you're dressed like, no offense, if you're dressed like a hoe and he's like, "Hey, can we not go see my parents while your boobs are out?" Like, yeah, all right, that he's not a psycho, all right? But you start seeing a lot of that. Like that is a time to run. It doesn't matter if it's an accident. It doesn't matter if this is like it's not worth it. Get out.
I
Um,
think, I think it just goes to show, like, how much I don't know.
hmm. How about I
I
tell
had
you what
just
I see?
always wanted to be loved and to fit in,
Hmm.
and it just led me down this horrible road of just wanting to fit in into this community,
Hmm.
and then also breaking free from that, and then falling back into that need for
Hmm.
fitting in again, but with an abuser,
I see
and my
that.
lack of confidence.
I see that, but I don't know. I see something else. Maybe I'm wrong, right? I'm shooting from the hip here. But it also seems like what you described is you finally saw a future,
Mhm.
even if it was in the wrong person,
Yeah.
right? It was enough for you to find, like you said, you found yourself, right?
Mm.
And I think maybe there's something to that you can give yourself credit for that you don't have to give that piece of shit credit for, right? That you finally got to a
Yeah.
point where you could see what it is that you wanted.
Mhm.
And throughout this whole story you've told me, because I mean it's a sordid tale. These stories are never easy. I've never heard a detrans person's story that isn't fraught with trauma and abuse and bullying, and they're all hard to hear. They're all hard to listen to. And I think that's what makes them so important. But I was trying to make heads or tails of this femininity that you attach yourself to so much.
Mhm.
I saw this tweet that you had at one point, and it's these little moments that hit us, right? It's these little things that you don't think will be so impactful, but when you hear it said, it really elucidates the entire thing. You felt like your quinceanera had been stolen from you,
Yeah.
and I saw that, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense, right? But now it makes even more, so much more sense why you're finding yourself and your strength, and you're like, if I'm gonna find me and latch on to who I am and not let myself fall away again, then I'm gonna have those experiences. I'm gonna embrace that little girl inside of me that I lost, that didn't get to have those experiences. And fuck you, I'm gonna wear the cute little dress, and you can call me a grifter or whatever the hell you want, because I know that this is what I want, and I finally know what I want, because I didn't know that because I was just so fucking alone. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of awesome, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people don't get there.
Mhm. Yeah, I personally believe that whoever we are as children is who we truly are. I believe that I we're meant to get lost in life and try to find our way back, and I do feel like I was robbed of these experiences.
Mm,
I I had always expected myself to have a quinceañera. I remember when my mom would go get her clothes sewn or adjusted, it was at this shop that had quinceañera dresses, and I would always, like, pick one out, like, "Oh, that's gonna be my dress," and my prom too, I wondered, "Oh, who's gonna be my prom date?" And I had fallen into this hole of self-hate and wanting to escape because of the bullying, and that's something I will never get back. I remember my 16th birthday, I was just so sad because I wasn't gonna get a quinceañera, and my mom said something like, "Oh, well, you wanna be a boy, so you would have had one." That's this is who I've always been,
Mm-hmm.
very feminine. It's what I've wanted and what I find joy in, and that's something I'll never get back. I'll never have a normal high school experience. I'll never have a boy ask me to prom. I'll never have a quinceañera, and that does hurt. But, maybe one day I get to have a boy properly ask me to be his girlfriend, and I'll have a wedding. But
I mean, I know that this is so empty when I say it, and I know that it brings almost no comfort. And yet I still feel obligated to say it. Maybe I'm just an asshole, but you're very lucky in that so many detrans people will never be able to breastfeed.
yeah,
Um, and I do think that there is some hope, right? In that that is a possibility if you strive for it, right? That a lot of people were robbed of. Um, you were robbed of a lot of the things that go towards making that a healthy vision in the future, and you have to find that again. But I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of like it's there, so I have to like almost say it. But you know, I also understand how empty it is. But I mean, it's as shitty as it says. At least there's that. I don't know. I don't know where to
yeah,
put that. It's not a fun thing to talk about. This entire situation, right? It is something that is not necessarily unique to you, though, and
mhm,
that's why it is a shitty conversation that has to be had. It's not a good convo. It's not a good talk, right? It's. I mean, it might be entertaining to some people in some macabre sense, right? To people have always loved watching serial killers or things. Hearing someone else's tragic lifestyle might make them feel better in that way. But that's not why we're having this conversation. I don't think that's why you're speaking up. I think you're speaking up because you're seeing it happen to other children.
yeah. Um, I mean, I think there's a reason majority of these kids are little girls. Uh,
Hmm.
I think every detransition woman, it has something to do with their womanhood, whether it's, like, their discomfort with being a lesbian, whether it's just struggling with puberty. There's a reason that they're little girls. It's because the minute that you are born female, the minute that your life is gonna be hell, essentially. It's gonna be uncomfortable. I think it takes a lot to raise a little girl.
Hmm.
It takes building their confidence and tending to their emotional needs, and I think people just downplay how you're supposed to raise a little girl. "Oh, girls are." I don't know.
I have a daughter myself, so I mean, she's very very young. Um, but even now, it's kind of funny because you know I this is like such a weird thing to say. God, I'm way too open as a streamer. But whatever. You've been super open, so I'll be open, right? One of the things I do is I'm very particular about using proper anatomical names, right?
Mm,
And I'm very open about trying my best to, because she hates getting like her butt changed or something if we go out.
mm,
She's potty trained, but like she's not fully potty trained in the sense like she doesn't use public restrooms very well, or like other people's restrooms, but she knows where mine is. And so I'm very particular. I'm like, all right, we have to clean your vulva. Like, we're going to do this. And it's like, is that okay? And like, she'll freak out and I'll be like, all right, I'll give you some time, but like, this has to get done. And like, and I've had comments and other people that are like, what is wrong with you? Like, just clean it. And I'm like, no, 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 no. My daughter is going to understand healthy boundaries at a young age and understand what
yeah,
the
that
names
too.
of her body parts are. And she's going to understand that, like, yes, certain things have to be done because I'm the parent and like, we can't have you getting a rash or anything
Mm,
like that. But at the same time, like, I need you to recognize that like this is your body. And if you're vocal about it, like then that's your space. And then like I
mm,
gotta back off. And then people and some people, it's so funny because it'll go in like both directions. Like some people will be like, you're being creepy. And then other people will give me this idea that like I'm being like some weird lefty or something. And it's like, no, I'm trying to teach my daughter at a young age boundaries. Like
yeah,
and recognize that she needs to be vocal about those and that she needs to be strong because people aren't going to attempt to violate my son's boundaries the same way they are my daughter's. Like,
yeah,
I disagree with the feminist narrative maybe a little bit, as you put it, because I think the grass is always greener on the other side. I think there's a whole lot of issues that come with being a man that women don't have,
yeah,
but that doesn't mean that there aren't specific issues that girls and women face, and that
yeah,
might play a role
mm,
here in Detrans. The way I see it is there's it, I don't know if I'm right because these are so rare, right? So it's just anecdotal. I don't have any research to back this up, but a common thread that I see with female to male transitioners, and their kind of waking up moment is there's an urge for motherhood, and
yeah,
and women are on such a smaller time frame. By the time you're 30 years old, you better be having children soon, or because like it's not happening, and men are just not on that same clock. And
yeah,
so I think that there's this common thread with the D-trans because the research from the UK tends to show that it's like 4 or 5 years is when female to males start D-transing, and
mhm,
it can be like 7 or 8 years for men. Like it's a longer period. Um, I think that role of as you get up, you said you saw the same thing even in your abuser. Like you saw the idea of a family, and
mhm,
there's a disconnect there because reality starts to slap you in the face a little bit, and you go, well, how am I going to have a family if I can't get pregnant, right? Like, how am I going to have a family if I can't breastfeed?
yeah,
How am I going to have that white picket fence kind of
mm,
lifestyle? Am I going to adopt? Like, and, and and at first that sounds cool and fine. You rationalize it, but then once your brain and your emotions start kicking it up, we both know you don't want to adopt. We both know you want to experience what it's like to be a mother.
yeah. I had always wanted kids. I throughout getting testosterone, that was something I had emphasized. Um, I got my list of, symptoms, and they were all cosmetic, clear as day. I remember there were things on the list that were like, "You will get fat redistribution, you will get hair." It was
Mm-hmm.
2 pieces of paper, and all the symptoms were listed on one, and they were all cosmetic: hair loss, um, I think things of that nature, but I remember looking through that paper for anything to do with fertility because that was something I had wanted. I literally, the week prior, had been at the lunch table with my friends, and I said, "I won't go on it if I will become infertile because I wanna get pregnant one day." I said something along those lines. I remember that clear as day. And when I didn't see anything on that paper in regards to that, nothing about, like, freezing your eggs, nothing about the potential to become infertile, I had asked the nurse who had been the one to give me the testosterone. The doctor had popped in for, like, a minute to introduce himself, and then he left.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the nurse, and I asked him, "Will I be able to get pregnant? Is it safe? And he's like, "Yeah, you don't have anything to worry about." And he's like, "Just come off of it." And that was what I had fully believed,
Was this
and
hold on, was this at Planned Parenthood?
yes, and
Was this an endocrinologist or just a doctor?
this was a nurse. This was
Okay.
not a doctor. He was a trans nurse. He looked like he had been on T for years. Um, and that's what I believed, so I was like, "Okay, that's fine. Uh, I'm gonna be fine." And I remember calling my sister and even telling her, I was like, "I can have kids, it's okay." And then I met my abuser, and I saw a way out, like, as you explained, and I thought all that was gonna happen was I was gonna get off testosterone and I was gonna be able to have kids, which this man did feed that desire because he told me that he wanted to get me pregnant, which, long story short on why he wanted that, is because he wanted to do bad things to children, and I didn't know that. I just thought that this guy liked me as much as I liked him. Finally, I'm gonna have my family. Uh, but my sister ended up saving me. I had sent her a link to getting top surgery, or I would bring it up. I don't remember bringing it up to her. Apparently, she remembers me calling her and talking about it. I don't remember that, but I do remember sending her messages about it, and she said that she would purposely hold off that conversation and ignore me so that I would not get top surgery, and she is the reason that I still have my chest and that I can still breastfeed, and
Mm,
I'm so thankful for that. I'm so thankful that she never really truly believed it. Um,
mm.
but yeah, I this boyfriend, Malachi, he had been wanting to trap me, so if there was no protection, you know, he would
Yeah.
try to get me pregnant, and thank God, nothing ever happened, but it did start to concern me because why wasn't anything happening? Um, so I was getting very paranoid. I would start tracking my cycles. I would track my ovulation with ovulation kits, temping. It's just so many things. I was clearing out my system with birth control cleansers. I was drinking teas. I was avoiding certain foods, like certain dairies, like low fat dairies. I was just so paranoid, and I remember just crying anytime it didn't happen. And I didn't know if I messed up, if I could even have kids. And thankfully, I am fertile. I had exams and ultrasounds, and um my ovulation was it was fine. It was the same time every month. The reason that it's ironic, but the reason that nothing ever happened was because he wasn't fertile.
Thank
He
God. I don't know. Look, I'm not a Christian. But there's a few elements in your story where somebody was looking out for
Yeah,
you.
for sure.
Jesus. Yeah. That is such a dark irony. Is
Yeah.
that the abuser that helped you was the one that was infertile.
Mhm.
Oh man.
And the reason
Um
yeah.
no, I don't know where to go after that other than to say, hey, at least you're out. Um that is a harrowing tale. Uh it certainly is. And I think the things that always upset me isn't the it's not the abuse, it's not the depression, it's not the anxieties, it's not even the creeps on the internet that like to crack eggs on teenagers and try and get them to, move more towards their cultish ideals. I think the thing that always gets me when I hear these stories is the presumed experts that are supposed to be, you know, giving informed consent, that are supposed to be helping you. You come to these people vulnerable, and you, everyone you're dealing with, you're vulnerable, right? But at least in this states, I think your abuser proved that more than anything, right? Like it's probably
Yeah.
selected you because of that. But you're vulnerable, and you go to these people for help, and they're not just incompetent, they're lying. I don't buy the old
Yeah.
lady. No offense to you and your intuition, even though like you have far more information than I do. I still don't buy it. I don't buy that the old lady was just incompetent. I think she had a vision of how things should be, and had decided what you were, in some regards, and then was just trying to make whatever you said fit into a puzzle box. And when it didn't quite fit, she crammed it in because that's was her way of helping. And the nurse that completely and utterly lied to you and told you that this has
Yeah.
no effect on fertility is the most, even a cursory inspection of the research will show that to be completely and utterly false.
Yeah.
Or the teachers that have a vulnerable child that is bullied and isolated, that has obsessive compulsive disorder, probably generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder, all wrapped up into a nice little bow, that make fun of you and that don't engage with you and then don't recognize that you have special requests. Any one of those teachers should have gone to your parent and said, hey, look,
Yeah.
your daughter has OCD. She has special needs. And I know that you don't want to hear this about your daughter, but she needs an IEP done so that like she can get extra trips to the bathroom, or so that like she can get a few more extra minutes when she's taking tests, to make sure that she's not stuck in a ritual in the middle of a test and she's not getting an F on the test because she doesn't know the material, but because she feels she needs to put her pen on the corner of the desk 15 times after each fucking question all of a sudden. And like she can't get the test done. You know what I mean? Like any one of these people could have saved you. And it's kind of their job, their moral obligation to do so. And yet, a philosophy has promulgated the school system that is cultish and disgusting and not actually empathetic or dealing with people in an appropriate way. And it's done the same to the medical community and to counseling. And so an ideology has governed the truth and kept the truth from you in a way that doesn't make you blameless, right? I mean, there's always some level of blame on the
Yeah.
individual, some level of personal responsibility. But it's difficult to see that path when I hear your story.
Yeah. Um, I think s- I do get angry sometimes. What if that one person had saved me? What if
Mm,
it had been a different nurse or
mm.
a different school? But as shitty as it sounds, I think I was meant to go down this path. And I think everything happened the way that it was meant to.
Are you Christian? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Mm.
I mean, if harrowing experiences tend to bring people closer to God. I'm not a Christian myself. I'm an atheist, but I also went to Liberty for grad school, right? Like I'm not your typical atheist. I'm not amazing atheist over here. You know what I mean? Like I I have a certain respect for it, and I understand how you would feel in that, at least giving a sense of purpose there. And speaking of that purpose, I guess now that we have this, all our cards are out on the table, or at least all yours are, at least. What do you want moving forward? because that's something that I see very different in you from a lot of the other people. I was going through all of your tweets, and I was going hardcore. I was like, all right, advanced search for the word groom, advanced search for the word abuse, advanced search for this. Like I went through your whole fucking Twitter. Just being honest, right? Because I want to prepare. And one of the things that I noticed is you'll say, no, there are trans children. They exist, right? Some of
Mm.
these services should be available for some of these kids. And then I also see some reference and some ideas of being a Christian yourself. And then of course you see all these people calling you a grifter. And it's like you're sitting, which obviously I don't believe, not after this conversation, but you're sitting in this weird liminal space where you don't necessarily quite fit the puzzle piece again, right? All over again, you don't quite fit that puzzle piece that people try to shove you into that box. And so I'm curious what your prescriptions are moving forward. Like, what do you want to see happen? And how do you want to use your story and your life and whatever little limited power that you have as you discover yourself to maybe make at least one girl, one boy not go through the trauma that you went through?
I do believe that there are trans people and children, but I think it's very, very
Mm-hmm.
rare. And I just don't think any child should have access. I don't even think it should be available until you're 25.
Mm,
I just think there's no a win-win situation here. Like, if it's available to people that young and children and they're not trans, then there's gonna be detransitioners. There's gonna be stories like mine, even worse, where
mm-hmm.
women are infertile, men are completely castrated, or there's going to be that very, very rare story of that child actually being trans and they grow up and they won't be able to have any of these procedures if they wish because they just didn't grow. They just didn't grow the tissue. It's just there's no win situation here. It's I think there's just going to be a majority of regret.
Mm,
I don't I wish if anything with my story, I would want there to be awareness on how fragile little girls are and their minds, and that this is a social contagion for little girls. Um, and I want parents to watch after their children and the media that they consume, the schools that they're going to. But, even then, that's hard because these parents are told, "If you don't do this, you don't love your child." They're essentially threatened,
mm.
they're essentially, um
You can either have a dead daughter or a living son.
exactly, which is
Right.
not true. It doesn't even make sense because, you
Because suicidality isn't reduced post transition, only
not
in a
only
very
that,
small
but
window, only in a small window at about 2 years, which is the studies they use. Yeah, no, we get it. It's
not
emotional
only that,
blackmail,
but
is
it's
what
like
James Lindsay
yeah,
calls
yeah,
it. He calls it emotional blackmail, right?
yeah.
And so he puts forward a prescription that if people tell you this, right, that like these children are going to kill themselves, you restrict these, then you just go, oh, well, it sounds like there's something to do with queer theory and gender theory that makes people suicidal. We should institutionalize them and fix them, and then they shut up real quick. I take a very different approach on this personally. I don't know how much you looked into me, but I sit in a weird position. I don't fit in the puzzle box in this culture war either, because I'm an anarchist. I'm a right wing anarchist. I'm a
Mm,
libertarian to the most extreme degree. And the way that I see it, the only solution that I see is that people like you should be able to sue every doctor that dealt with you as a minor and
yeah,
encouraged you, and it should be the burden of proof on those that facilitated your transition as a minor, right? Planned Parenthood. Well, I mean, the nurse should be able to be sued for fraud because she lied to you and didn't give you informed consent. And I
Yeah.
think the burden of proof should be on them. And the reason I say that I think the burden of proof should be on them is because you're literally incapable of giving consent as a minor. And if as an adult you realize that you shouldn't have done those things, then whatever fault, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. What matters is that they aggressed upon you, that they transitioned you, and you were not someone that should have been transitioned, and you were harmed in such way. You were incapable of giving consent. And I think if we instituted this as a policy all the way around, what you would find is the only people who would do this without insanely high malpractice insurance that basically put them out of business would be people that are like, cool, your daughter wants androgen therapy. I want to see the Facebook posts from when she was 3 years old where she was saying she was a boy. And I want to see him at 5. And I want to see him at 7. And I want to see like in elementary school. And I want to see it in middle school. I want to see an entire life claiming to be this gender and never desisting. And if I see that and I have that documented evidence, maybe we'll talk about options from there,
Yeah.
because I think that's probably the right way to go about it, because there always will be the Buck Angels of the world, right? I don't know
Mhm.
if you've looked at any of his content. I
Yeah.
talk with
I know
him,
Black Angel.
but
Yeah.
he was claiming to be a boy at like 3 years old, and like that constantly reoccurred. He was an androgynous model in his 20s and was still like, I don't know, I feel like a boy. Like,
Mhm.
it's like those people do exist, but they're extremely rare, like you said. Um, how do you feel about the political shitstorm that's headed your way that you probably can't avoid at this point?
Um, well, like I said, I've been avoiding talking about this for 2 years. I did
Mm-hmm.
I did just want to live out my life and just be a female. But while I was being abused, my abuser kept me from posting on social media. He kept me from making friends. All my accounts had to be private. The thing that I did keep secret was JadeRants, my Twitter, and my Twitch account
Mm-hmm.
was Atreus. But even then, I was just so heavily abused that I felt I just couldn't betray him. I couldn't do anything that he didn't want me to do. And I don't think it's something that I should be ashamed of. I am ashamed of it some days. I'm like, wow, this is really a part of my story. That's really embarrassing. There's old pictures of me. But it's the reason I am the way that I am.
Mm.
I it's the reason I have such a deep appreciation for my womanhood and for being here. But, sorry, what was your question? I was getting
No,
somewhere.
no, it's fine. I mean, like, hey,
I
sometimes we
was
get lost.
I had
We
a
get lost in ourselves,
yeah, I was
and it.
going somewhere with this.
Well, no, I was just curious about the political storm that's coming for you,
Right, right,
and then
right.
you were describing the fact that you were controlled
Yeah.
and you were unable to tell your story for a while, but then after that you just wanted to, you just wanted to be happy and healthy and be a woman. But like, how can you be authentic? It seems like what you're describing is, how can I be authentic if I'm not open about
Mhm.
what made me who I am? Because
Yeah.
you do have a very, how would I say, I'm going to be as, I'm just going to be honest, right? If I stumbled on your Twitter account and I didn't see anything to do with Detrans whatsoever, and I just saw photos or whatever, I think there would probably be a very big like red pill kind of knee jerk reaction to like the girl that's showing her skin and is a Twitch streamer type situation, right? Um, but it is kind of part of your story, and it is kind of also what drew me in. I know that sounds creepier than I mean it to sound,
No,
but I mean, it's like, was the fact that you were a detrans person and so open about your femininity. The only person I've really seen that has been like that honestly, no one really. I mean, like Shapeshifter is kind of like another person that doesn't quite fit in
Yeah,
that box where he is like, yeah, I'm a
very
transsexual, but
feminine.
like this is my body now and I'm gonna
Yeah.
rock my feminine body. Like the fuck do you want me to do? Go back to being a
Mm.
dude? I literally can't. Um, but
I
yeah.
think so. I think not only is this sort of a slap in the face of my abuser, like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be ashamed of who I am," but I did process this for a long time, like,
Mhm,
the shitstorm, how it would be like, how it would be perceived, the hate on both ends, and I just don't think mine is a story that should be hidden.
mhm,
I think if I can help one little girl, then it's not something that I should be ashamed of. I'd want my own daughter to hear my story, and if I would want her to hear it one day, then I don't think I should be ashamed of it.
mm,
And I understand that this is also dangerous. You know, there are violent leftists, there are feminists that don't like me because of my femininity. There's just there's a lot to it, and I don't know.
I will say this, especially when dealing with the feminists. Um, if you're gonna be in the space, right, you're probably gonna have to read queer theory and gender theory, and really get into it, which might be triggering. I don't know. Um, but there's a lot of little political camps and it really deals with the philosophy. You know, you have the people who lovingly call themselves turfs because they're against this in the culture war. And then you have like actual turfs, right? That are trans exclusionary radical feminists that like think the entire idea of gender is something created by John Money and that like there's only sex and gender doesn't exist. Um, I'm not going to make any statements about that in this because it just doesn't seem to fit the vein of this conversation. But I certainly have opinions. Um, you know, and so like, and I think yeah, there's going to be a lot of different angles that come at it. But man, more power to you for stepping into this because you know I'm fortunate in the like my introduction into politics is like 2 years of struggling every step of the way as opposed to just getting hit with a deluge of it. Which if I have to be honest, and I'm not trying to scare you, but like I follow this stuff pretty closely, and you're probably about to get a whole lot more attention.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think you see it too. I think you
There
see the wind shifting,
there's
and
also this, misconception that I want attention when no person with social anxiety likes attention, but
right.
I mean, I honestly wasn't expecting it, but I did consider it as a possibility, and it's just something that I have to prepare myself for. Um, but I do believe that whoever is going to be a part of my life and whoever is going to love me or appreciate me or value me, those are the only people that matter.
Mhm. Yeah, if that ain't the truth, I'll say this. Um, I know, I know, I know he follows you on Twitter. I don't know how close you are, if at all.
Mm.
But Richie Tulipar,
Oh, yeah. Um, he's
get to
DM'd
get
me, but
yeah, get to know him better because he's a little wild, he's a little crazy. But if you ever need somebody that will be a shield and doesn't mind fucking taking on all of the attention and like having your back, Richie is that person. Richie's like
Yeah,
is
I've
at least with
seen
every interaction I've had with him. Definitely. And was my kind of first foray into talking to detrans individuals. And Richie's a badass. And Richie
yeah.
doesn't mind pissing off all the conservatives and all the turfs and all the lefties. Like, it doesn't matter what it
That's
is. You
sweet.
should, you should, if you're ever feeling like you need to talk to other detrans people, like talk to Richie. Richie will have your back. I wholeheartedly believe that. And because I mean,
Actually
there's going to be some wild shit that comes your way sometimes.
I actually remember Richie's very first post. I was a private account. Um, like I said, I've been hiding this for a while, but
Mm-hmm.
I remember his face reveal. I remember, um, he didn't yeah.
Well, I remember I had Richie. There was a moment I had with Richie when I had him on that big panel I did where we were talking about trans issues, and of course we got forced off of Twitch like instantly. We were about to be probably one of the biggest things in just chatting, and then one of the other people got banned like right as we were like going, and so I had to move it off Twitch to YouTube, and like my YouTube wasn't even like my YouTube is really small. Um, and so it was just like it kind of got buried. But I was talking and like people brought up Keffels and Richie just like immediately interrupts. It was like that fucking groomer. And I was just like, Jesus. I was like, can we say that? I was like, don't get Keffels after me. It's like she's got a lot of power, man. And he was just like, no, fuck that groomer. And I'm like, man, I was like, from that moment on, I was like, I love Richie's energy. That Richie's definitely somebody
Yeah.
to have. Is there anything that you wanted to ask or that you wanted to explore or that you wanted to talk about? Because, you know, we've gone through, I mean, this is an interview, right? So I've just been trying to pull apart your story, grab your timeline and kind of
Mm.
piece out what it is that you believe. But I mean, like, if there's room for conversation here, you know, I'm totally willing to give my ideas or my opinions or, you know, if there's anything that you're curious about here, I'd love to talk about it.
I think a lot of my detransition is tied into the story of my abuse,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't think I've really talked about on Twitter, but I think, it shows how vulnerable I was and how much I valued myself, which was not much, even though I had found out what I wanted and who I wanted to be. I had always just been something to step on since I
Mm.
was a kid. Uh, I had always wanted approval, not approval, but to be appreciated for who I was, and I never found that. And the minute that I found that, it was like this leech, this abuser. Um, yeah, I don't know. All my health issues I had experienced during that relationship, the surgery, if there's I don't know.
No, no, it's okay. I mean, it's okay to explore. Sometimes when we're exploring, you know, we get a little lost, and you know, I think that's kind of the story of your life, right? I mean,
Mhm.
is exploring and getting lost, and the tragedy that comes with that. But I mean, it's okay in conversation to think out loud. Um, so I asked you if there was anything that you wanted to talk about specifically that I didn't really go into, and you're saying the thing that you haven't quite figured out, haven't quite put a pin in, but you
Mhm.
know is important, right? Like you know that
Yeah,
there's something here that needs to be picked out, which is the abuse and the vulnerability and what seems like you're describing
yeah.
as, you know, codependency, right?
Mhm.
The need to latch yourself to someone else, and that is something, you know, I've done some talks about this, because one of the biggest things that is widely under discussed in this conversation is the prevalence towards personality disorders within the trans community. You know, specifically narcissistic personality disorder and also um, borderline personality disorder.
Hmm.
But personality disorders in general, it also includes, you know, obsessive personality disorder, which is, you know, almost a complete overlap of obsessive compulsive disorder and things of that nature. And so, you know, there is a kind of a thing that the research doesn't show, that I have a strong hypothesis towards, that I'm constantly looking at, and I'm saying, why is no one looking into this? Which is both the narcissist and the codependent deeply searching. Either the narcissist is searching for a fantasy narrative to be filled with a narcissistic supply by others, and demanding that the other members of the cult, if you will, recognize their identity, and then manipulating and gaslighting other people to being a part of their shared fantasy. And there's also something to the codependent that is searching for something to latch onto because of not quite having a fully formed identity themselves. Please just give me an identity. Please just tell me who I am, because I can't find who I am. Please just accept me. Please just tell me what steps I'm supposed to take, because I'm too scared to take them myself. And I need you to tell me what I'm supposed to do. That is widely understudied and incredibly dangerous in this, because I think if I should say, the ideology falls away, if there is some form of a recapture of science here, and we really dig into it, I think we will see that there are these disorders that latch on to transition as a means of solving those bigger underlying problems. And I think you're right. I think there is something there that is not discussed and not understood, but you kind of know it experientially, right? Like you've experienced it, so you know it, but how do you name something that the experts haven't named yet?
Um, my therapist, because I had to get one after the whole abusive situation, but I discussed that with her, and I do agree that that's a problem, but she did not think that I had any sort of cluster B personality
Mm, mm,
disorder. She described me as somebody that has complex PTSD and a hopeless romantic that sort of tried to seek out this acceptance and belonging
mm.
that I had lost with my sister when she had moved away.
Yeah, I mean, individual differences may vary for sure, but I perhaps it was too strong about correlating the personality disorder with you, and even more broadly, not just cluster Bs, but cluster As and Cs. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, I simply mean to say that this has become a quick fix that a lot of people are jumping
Yeah,
towards a whole
for sure.
host of
Mhm,
of disorders.
mhm.
Um, I can't armchair psychology. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
just may, you know.
I
Uh,
agree that it's just when you see something that's being painted as the solution, the happiness,
mm,
any broken child or teenager is going to gravitate towards that, especially when it's all over the media. I mean,
mm.
e ev anytime you turn on a TV show, the leading female, oh, you find out she's non-binary or transitioning. It's like that's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
what you're
there is something to be said about normalization, like the conservative kind of knee jerk reaction. There's some wisdom in that. You know, I don't tie myself to that at all, right? The conservatives that say, you know, this is degeneracy, don't normalize it. Like my instinct is to go, fuck off, right? Like I don't care. I don't care for your trad values. And yet there is also kind of, how do I put this? Ironically enough, you can, it's better in the book, but you can see the speech that is made in, it's not the Da Vinci Code, it's the second book, Gods and Demons, right? When the priest is the main character, the bad guy, right, is talking to the other individuals while they're trying to decide who the next pope will be. And he gives this wonderful kind of speech. And it's so good because it's not a straw man, it's a steel man. from someone that's obviously looking at this character as evil. It's a great steel man for something that is there in conservatism, right? Which is, he says, science will discover how lightning works and how thunder works, and will explain all of the different ways in which weather systems, etc. And it's only the religious that are saying that's great, that's awesome, but slow down and respect nature's awesome power. Like, in the effort towards this, you have forgotten how how insane lightning is, right? Like, you're playing with lightning. And so I think the same thing is kind of true with many of these issues. Is there's this overwhelming philosophical push towards acceptance that I think is very nefarious, and not done for the right reasons, but done in an illiberal way to create gender abolitionism and critical theory through gender as a means of creating an oppressed oppressor narrative, that is just another form of Marxism. But setting that aside, um, I think that there is something to that knee jerk reaction of like, dude, we should not be normalizing this so quickly without understanding what effects that has on our culture and our society. And like, how dare you tell me, whoa, maybe we should slow down when you're looking at, 40% of kids in California schools identifying as some form of LGBT. That's not, we've never seen that in any nation
Yeah.
in the history of the world. And all of a sudden we see it and people are like, we need more. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Slow the fuck down.
Yeah. I agree.
Someone in chat said, beta take Pope. Not all Christians are Catholics. Motherfucker. I was just giving an example from media in terms of like the conservative kind of reactionary idea, right? And I mean that in the most Marxian of ways, right? Oh God, I hate chat sometimes. Um, but again, is there any? I don't know. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss politically, policy wise? My opinions. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? I'm really
um,
happy that you shared your story. It's a it's a doozy. That's for damn
there's
sure.
much more to it. Um, I don't know, any questions you have about my story or tweets or anything?
I mean, I feel like I kind of structured this entire conversation around stories about your story, questions about your story and your tweets. I don't mean like I'd love to talk with you sometime, after in like a couple months
Mm,
after, because I feel like this is probably going to hit you. You're going to get a lot of attention.
yeah.
And if you do decide to get more involved, I totally understand if you want to step away and you're like, dude, this is my story. I'm going to let the politicians deal with it as it is. I just want my story to be out there. But if you do get involved, and you start meeting people and understanding, the politics a little bit, I'd be interested to see how that how you feel about that. Because like I said from the very beginning, like I appreciate how you fit yourself a little bit in a different box.
Mm,
You don't go into this hardcore like turf kind of like anti-trans kind of box. So to be interested to see how that comes about once you get involved in politics a little more. And
yeah.
you ever want to come and speak to the most anti-government person on Twitch, definitely you should swing by.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Well, it seems like the conversation is wrapping up. Again, I really appreciate you coming by, and stay in touch. If you want to shout out where people can find you, also your Twitch. Maybe you don't want any political people, and maybe you have like steadfast rules against that. But I think there might be some people here that want to check you out as well in that
Yeah,
regard, even if it is just gaming.
I would prefer to just game on there and, just
Yeah,
have
that's
my
what I
own
figured.
separate, but if I just would prefer not to talk about that while I'm gaming, but if you would like to just hang out with me, my Twitch is Atreus, so it's spelled Atreuz, and if you are interested in, like, more serious topics, my Twitter is JadeRants, so
Yeah. Again, I'm really happy to, I mean, is there any like, anything else? You have anything else for us?
Uh, no, I think that's it. Thank you for talking to me. I know I'm not like the most, uh, I don't know, articulate or yeah, I don't know.
Everybody, almost everyone has a story to tell. And if you don't come off correctly in some capacity, it's my failure as an interviewer, not yours in telling your story, because these are hard stories to tell. And I think you did a great job telling that story. Even if there are pieces that that don't quite fit in the puzzle perfectly in like in the timeline or anything, you know, I'm really happy that you told that story. And I won't don't be a stranger, right? You can always DM me or anything like that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um,
I will definitely make a video about this so everything sort of has a timeline and makes more sense and I'm not like stuttering, but yeah, thank you.
that's how these things go. That's how these things go. You have to work through them.
Mhm.
Like I said, it's not an easy story to tell, but hopefully we'll see you around. And like I said, reach out to Richie. Richie's good people. When the shit hits the fan, don't forget that Richie's there.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, you have a great evening.
You too.